No matter who you are or where you go, heading outside is always worth it. Welcome to Humans Outside, where we're using the Humans Outside 365 Challenge to build a life around spending time in nature while learning from fascinating outdoor-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz. I've let curiosity be my guide as a journalist for 18 years. But life, including my husband's war injuries, had burnt us out. So we moved sight unseen to Alaska to see if a change of scenery and new focus on outdoors was just the shift we needed. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter what, to explore how nature can change my life. Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go! My favorite interviews for Humans Outside are the ones that get my own wheels turning, that challenge me to better my own outdoor time. They are the interviews I go back to time and again as reminders of what nature can do for me, of what I've learned and ways I can challenge myself. They're with the people I think about when I'm out there having a great adventure of my own. My interview in 2021 with artist and videographer Max Romey is a perfect example. Max lives here in Alaska, where he combines watercolor paintings created literally on mountaintops with GoPro videos to both educate and make you feel like you are physically in the painting and moment too. I just loved my conversation with him about creativity in nature. And since he has a film in the highly competitive Banff Mountain Film Festival called If You Give a Beach a Bottle, and is screening a separate film here in Alaska in a few weeks, which I get to attend, I wanted to re-air this interview in honor of everything he's done. I can't wait for you to listen. I've left the intro I did in 2021 on this episode so you can hear a little bit more about Max before we dive into our discussion. I hope you enjoy this Best of Humans Outside episode. Max Romey is a person in motion. I usually start our episodes trying to capture my guests by describing who they are or what they do. But when I was trying to figure out how to introduce Max to you all, I had a lot of trouble. He's an artist who paints stunning watercolors of mountains and ridges worldwide, often while on top of the mountain he's sketching, which means he had to get there first. He's a filmmaker who specializes in capturing athletes, particularly trail and ultra runners, as they do their thing. He's a runner himself, and not just because he has to keep up with the people he's filming, but because, like I said, Max is a person in motion. But my favorite thing about today's incredible guest is that he's a storyteller, pairing watercolor with film and often running to bring mountainscapes and the people who love them to life in a way that really defies words. Seeing his art is like physically stepping into a painting. Today we're going to talk about heading outside to find a life in living color, but how getting out there unlocks who we are. Max, welcome to the Humans Outside podcast.
Thanks so much. Super glad to be here.
So we like to imagine ourselves hanging out in our guest's favorite outdoor space when we are talking to them. I can't imagine that you have, like only a few of those. I'm sure you have a lot. What is yours and where are we talking with you today?
I think my go-to outdoor place is up on a ridge called Little O'Malley, and it's just a quick hike from Glen Alps, and it kind of goes up this gully on this new trail, and it's got just enough of a hike where you feel like you got somewhere pretty high, and you're looking over and there's Anchorage in the background and there's Big O'Malley and it's a little bit stormy and it feels like you could just go anywhere and you have gotten out of the city and you're in Middle Earth finally. And that's kind of my go-to hike. So we're going to hang out right there in the saddle.
Awesome. I've been up there and it is a beautiful, beautiful place. So lots of beautiful places here in Alaska. It's hard to pick.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so tell us, how did you become a person who likes to go outside?
I think that it started when I was kind of bundled up like a sleeping bag with my parents. They were really good at getting us out, whether we wanted to or not. And looking back at the photo albums, there's, just like the little face in the backpack was me a lot of the time. And I remember just always being outside. And I don't remember when I wanted to become a person outside, though, because as a little kid, I just remember being dragged into the car on a Saturday afternoon and just kicking and screaming the entire way to the trailhead, not wanting to go. I wanted to like stay in and watch TV or something. And then the second the car door opened and we were outside, I was loving it and didn't want to go home. And then I guess at some point I grew up a little bit, and then I was the one who would put myself in the car kicking and screaming because I didn't want to go out for a run and drag myself to a trailhead. And I still love it all the way home.
So that, I mean, it isn't that just how life goes, you know? Like my son does something very similar, and now as an adult, I have this habit where I go outside 20 minutes every day, and some days are better than others, and I make my there are definitely days that I make myself go, and then there are always days that I don't want to come back inside.
Yeah. Well, I've heard this phrase. It's called like the doorstep mile. My friend Stian Angermundvik, who's a runner in Norway, has like the Norwegian word for it, and it's great. Very guttural. But like it's the idea that it's like the first mile of any run or walk or hike is getting out the door. And it's funny because it's like I love being outside, but I feel like that, that inner 8-year old is always there where it's like, I don't want to do this. Like, why? And if somebody else gets me out there, it's easy. But for me to actually get out of the door is so tough for some reason still. And I need to remind myself that it's like, all right, this is a common enough thing that there's a Norwegian phrase about it. So like
Yeah.
you're not alone. Other people struggle with this. Get out the door, it'll be fine. And then once you're there, it's easy. But
They say the only run you regret is the one you don't take. And I,
that's true.
that's like specific to running, but I think that's true for any kind of outdoor stuff. Like the only outdoor time you regret is the outdoor time you did not have.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Even
So
the bad ones. I feel like there's another Norwegian term for that. Of like, yeah, being outside when it's just miserable. Yeah, that makes you feel like an adventure. Like you can't lose. Although I guess you
yeah.
could like lose a finger or something, but even then, it's a good story.
Fair enough. You and I are both storytellers in our own way, so I can't help but agree with you on that. I like anytime there's like disaster, I'm like, well, that'll make a good blog post. Like,
Basically, you're gonna have a good time or a good story, and it's the same for out getting outdoors, making a painting, like
yeah,
telling a film. Like, yeah, it's kind of insurance.
I
Storytelling is insurance for life.
it absolutely is. I have we have Humans Outside supporters on Patreon, and one of the Patreon bonuses is a episode entirely devoted to Amy's outdoor fails, like stories of me doing something disastrous and someone else on like joining me in this episode to talk about my embarrassment. So
Yeah, no, it's a good, like I feel like some of the best stories, and it's the same with watercolors too. Like, I mean, it's not as embarrassing. Usually it's kind of horrifying, but like I would say probably my favorite paintings I've ever made often either start or end with just a massive mistake where you just like, oh, I wish I did not do that. And then it turns into something beautiful. And I feel like life, and especially getting outside, is usually the same way.
So that's a great segue to describe the kind of art you do. I feel like when I look at your art, it's very similar to the Mary Poppins scene where they step into the chalk and all of a sudden they're in this other world. That's how I feel when I view your paintings. Can you describe them for us, though, how you marry watercolor and video? Because I think it's just something that can be hard to visualize. So, how do you do
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's certainly what it feels like a little bit with Mary Poppins stepping into kind of that chalk world. I really like the intersection of watercolors and what it took to make them. And I have always been painting since I was a little kid, and I am recently, I guess 10 years is recent, into like videography and photography. But for me, like my first real language was watercolor. I think my grandmother was an incredible adventurer and watercolorist, and as a little kid, I would just spend so much time just like flipping through her sketchbooks. I couldn't read very well, but like I could flip through these and just like get them and kind of fall into that world. And I kind of want to reverse engineer that a little bit for other people to have that experience. So what I often do is I'll make a painting that fits perfectly into the landscape like a puzzle piece. So that way you can see where it came from. You don't just see the beautiful picture because the world is full of beautiful pictures, but you can kind of see that connection of the artwork into the landscape. And hopefully, if I do my job right, you can even see the connection of yourself into the landscape as well. So I'm still playing around with it. I so often feel that whether it's a film or a painting, you should create the artwork that you don't see,
Hmm.
that you would want to. And I've had a really good time making the paintings that I would like to see, but I feel like there's so much more. I want to see paintings that I want to see somebody be able to walk into a world of watercolor in the way that an artist can see it. And I want to see paintings that kind of explain and diagram stuff that doesn't exist or maybe is really hard to describe. So whether it's a time lapse or a painting puzzle piece that fits in, I've been posting a lot, but I feel like there's just a whole world to explore in there, and I'm so excited to see where it leads.
Was there like an aha moment that where you realized that this marriage of the film and the watercolor was going to unlock something for you, where they met like that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it was one of those accidents, to be honest. Like, I think, boy, that's a really good question. I think I never saw painting as something that was viable.
Mhm.
I I loved
From an
painting.
economic standpoint.
Well, honestly, from like a artistic standpoint,
Mhm.
I mean, I was working with Solomon pretty quick off. Like I've always been painting. It's just kind of been like a little side thing. I love to do it, but it's very much been just something I do on my own. And I thought kind of film was where it's at. Like I from college, I was working with a company called Run Gum, and then I switched over to a company called Solomon, and it was really cool. And I was getting a lot of feedback of these really neat videos. I mean, I was being flown around the world to run with some of like the coolest, fastest people and capture their story, and it was great. And I would always be painting on the side and just like like giving little paintings as gifts and everything, and it was fun, but that was really just for me. And then I think once I was like waiting for somebody on a mountaintop, like, and just sketching. I would have a
As
sketchbook
one
with me,
does.
as one does. Yeah. Well, I mean, like painting used to be a big thing. We're just watching what is it, Victoria on
Yeah.
Netflix right now, and the
Yeah.
queen is just like sketching all the time, and I was like, wow, she's so artistic. But like back in the day, that was just like a part of like life.
Mhm.
You would paint in the same way you would write. It was a
Mhm.
way to capture the world and communicate with others. And I'm really lucky that I've been encouraged to. And people give up on it a lot because if you paint until you're 9 years old and then you stop for 10 years and then you start again, you're basically painting at a 9 year old level, and people are embarrassed and they don't want to show anybody and they don't want to continue because it looks like a 9 year old painted that because that was kind of when you stopped. But I think what people don't realize is that if you keep on doing it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like it gets good quick. And then you just keep that up little by little, and you become a very good painter very quick. But I was sketching on top of one of these mountains, and I took a picture of like a mediocre sketch with a mediocre camera, and it became a very good picture. It was a better
Mhm.
picture than it was. Let's see. That picture was a better picture than the sketch and a better picture than just the landscape picture. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, that's really cool. Like that kind of gets it. And then all of a sudden, like that kind of happy mistake just led to more and more and more and more. And when you repeat something, you just get better and better at it. And so yeah, now I've kind of like stumbled into this, and I actually recently kind of left that sort of career of filming with Solomon and sort of these like large scale just running events, and I'm really diving into this kind of sketching painting thing, and it is so cool. Like yeah, mistakes, they lead you to some of the coolest places, and then you get lost, and then finding your way back out is where life happens.
Yeah. So, uh, we talked a little bit before we started recording about how you about how you sort of find your place in the world. I know you deal with dyslexia, and that's had a pretty big impact on how you ended up doing what you do. So, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think dyslexia is often pretty misunderstood. I know there's a lot of very famous dyslexics out there. uh, Walt Disney was dyslexic. Harrison Ford was so dyslexic he couldn't read the script, so somebody would have to record it for him, and he'd listen to it again and again before, filming Raiders of the Lost Ark with Indiana Jones or even Star Wars. So there's dyslexics all over the place, and what it does is it makes it more difficult to comprehend reading and writing. And you can still see perfectly fine, your eyes work. It's just the information kind of gets jumbled up inside of your brain. You have all these senses, and then your brain kind of puts them together. And for dyslexics, your brain is literally rewired. I mean, like your left side does something with your right side. I don't know. It's something with like how it's all wired up in there. Like obviously, I didn't go into neuroscience, but one of the effects of that is that like left and right is very difficult. That's when everybody says, "Oh, dyslexia, it's B's and D's." It's not really. It's just kind of your information is getting sent all over the place, and so reading and writing is a little bit more difficult. Like for comprehending, even though somebody reads it to me out loud, I get it instantly. It also means that lefts and rights are pretty difficult. People always say like you hold your fingers out and you have an L, the left hand makes the L, but for me I just see two L's because I can't really like tell that apart very well. It takes me like a few minutes. Um, and and so growing up, what that does is it really kind of can throw you for a loop. So if you are like dyslexic, or maybe if you have a kid who's dyslexic and struggling with that, what it is it just makes realistically middle school and high school a little bit more difficult. All these other kids are learning how to read and they're just picking it up really quick. And so for me, it just took a really long time. And I was good at faking it. It made me really good at like BSing everything, basically. I could fake read, I could listen to somebody else read the passage and then basically copy them. I would kind of hide it. I would like spell check everything. And I was pretty good at hiding a lot of this. But then on tests and everything, it would come out and it'd sort of fall back. My mom was really good at kind of picking that up. And she's like, all right, we see what's happening. We're going to get you a little extra time. We're going to be a good advocate for you. And so, in addition to like all the extra help that she was able to give me, she really encouraged me in the artistic side of things. My whole family did. And for me, watercolors kind of became this refuge because I was falling behind in everything aside from basically art. I whether no matter what subject it was, writing an essay was going to be brutal and terrible, and I wasn't going to be able to do it well because even though I had all these stories stuck in my brain, I couldn't get them out on paper without somebody being like, "You misspelled 90% of the words here." Like it is just it like written in red text from all the underlining basically on the computer, and so it was just this big struggle. Like English is both my first and my second language basically, and I still haven't gotten either. And and so watercolor was just this thing that I could do, and I would get it instantly. You can't misspell a painting. It was amazing. And so for me as a kid, I really just gravitated toward anything creative because it was this even playing field. Both athletics, watercolor, and kind of being outside were places I was sort of safe from words. And even today, I mean, my biggest nemesis is emails. It takes me maybe 4 or 5 times as long to write and read emails, and even then, it's pretty rough. But I'm comfortable in some of these places. They're little refuges for me.
So, okay, you just said that, you listed three things: running, watercolor, and being outside that were refuges. So I think it's really interesting that you've now created a career out of like the marriage of those three with a side of video.
Yeah, well, a lot of the success that I've seen in life happens in the intersections. If you want to be the best speed skater in the world, that's a great pursuit. And you can put your entire life, and then perhaps, if you're very lucky, you'll become the best speed skater in the world, after just working harder than everybody else for a very small amount of time until somebody else becomes faster than you. But if you want to become the best, speed skating, watercolor videographer in the world, that's much, much, much easier because that's just a Venn diagram that creates a color that very few people have seen.
I mean, it sounds pretty dangerous too, by the way. Like,
Oh, I honestly, I would totally go for it. I recently did a couple paintings in a helicopter, and I'm hooked. Like, I think that like
ah.
taking paintings places is wild, but like it's the same for anything. I mean, like if you just focus on one thing, you're one in maybe a billion. If there's a
Mhm.
billion people that do that, but as soon as you focus on two things, all of a sudden you're maybe one in a million. And you focus on three things and combine those, now you're one in maybe 1,000. And so for me, being able to use these tools really allowed me to kind of do things that I'd never seen done, and really give a lot of confidence to a kid that was struggling heavily to basically communicate with the outside world. And so it was really awesome to be able to find kind of my own thing, and kind of realize too that you don't have to be the best in the world. You can really be very unique very quickly by seeing the things you love to do and mixing them. And you know maybe you're not the best in the world, but who cares? You're doing three things that you love to do. So for me, yeah, the filmmaking, the watercolor, the being outside has been this awesome skeleton key that's kind of unlocked all these opportunities in life. But right now, I'm just excited for like how many more ingredients can I add to this? Like how can I make this even more different to bring more people in and get them excited about these things?
Okay, so two things you just said. First, you said you talked about unlocking who you are, and I'm wondering, and unlocking that creativity, and I'm wondering what part of that is tied to being outside. Like, does heading into nature have a role to play in unlocking that, or is that something that you can unlock in the same way by being a person who spends a lot of the time inside instead?
That's a good question. Oftentimes, I do find myself going into nature to seek out creativity. It draws me there. And to be honest, there's nothing we can do that will be more wild and surprising than what we can find outside. All you have to do is like look into nature and you'll find all the inspiration for the wildest, craziest dreams that you never even thought of. Maybe it'll be on a different scale, but even just like horror films and alien movies, I mean, all they do is they're basically like, what is the scariest thing we can create? And they go into their garden, they find a praying mantis, and they're like, all right, we'll make this 10 times larger. There we go. That's scarier than anything anybody can like conceive of. But it's the same with inspiration too. I mean, to go outside, it kind of hits something that's deep. It's like living in Alaska, who when you're here, when I first moved up here when I was 16, it just felt like home. And I'm not sure why. It just something clicked. And I feel like it kind of be the same in your brain. You get out there and ideas for me just happen. Oftentimes I'll kind of have all these pieces maybe in my normal life, but only once I go on a run out in the mountains do they kind of like all fall into place. And I feel enormously lucky that I live where I do and that I've been encouraged to get outside because who knows who I'd be without these big places. But yeah, I think creativity is something that you find in your own head, but only when you fill your head with the beautiful things that you can find outside.
The other thing you said was you talked about that intersection and adding layers to that. Do you think there are infinite layers?
I've heard that the amount of chess moves that you can do on a single chessboard with, after watching the Queen's Gambit, like I'm sure everybody's like, okay, chessboard's right. I think it's, like what, 20, 24 squares or something, or maybe it's like 48 squares and then, 18 pieces or something. And the amount of chess moves that you can do on one of those boards is a number so large that if you made a move per second, it would take in the billions of years to do all the moves. Something huge like that. And if you think about that with those 48 or however many numbers, I should actually look that up probably. But if you think about that with that limited like board that you can hold in your hand, and then you think of like how big the world is and how many things there are an infinite amount of things that you can add to what you're doing to make you unique and to have those combinations. It can feel kind of overwhelming, especially in the outdoor world, to kind of feel like you could stand out because every single day it seems like somebody else broke some record of maybe something that you were working on. Killian Jornet like runs up Everest in 27 hours. So it's like, all right, cool, check that one off. No way I'm gonna like, do anything remotely, stand outish in like the mountain running side of things. Or perhaps in watercolors, all you need to do is look on Instagram and you'll see like 1,000 artists that are better than you. It's absolutely just staggeringly depressing sometimes. Just in that it just depresses you down. It just pushes you down, like how much success there is and then how small you can feel. But in the same way, all it takes is just to add a few tiny extra things, and then all of a sudden you're in a world all to yourself. And it's a little bit like hiking out in Alaska. I mean, yeah, you can stand on these huge big trails and it's great, but then all you need to do is take like one or two single tracks and then maybe a moose path, and you're somewhere nobody's been for 1,000 years. And I feel like the outdoors kind of remind you of that. When you get up there, you might feel like all of these people are doing these big wild things, and you get on top of a mountain, and you realize like how much possibility there is, and then how small you are, and what a freeing thing that can be.
I'm so glad you said that because I was just thinking that exact same thing. When like it's so you can feel like the man is keeping you down, right? Due to like the excellence of so many other people. And as you said that, like that's exactly what I pictured. Like this moment where you're on top of a mountain or in a wild place, maybe if you're not in Alaska, where you feel that sense it's like both this sense of like absolute exhilaration like you just described, and it's very humbling. Like I am but a small cog in this wheel.
But what a wheel. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just it's so cool. And it is tough because it's yeah, it can really with the advent of social media, it can really feel like nothing you can do will be nearly as cool as what all these people do. And and that's something I still feel on a daily basis. And I kind of feel like the mountains are sort of medicine to that in a lot of
Mm.
ways. They don't care what you do. Like, you're just part of them regardless. They're so much bigger and older than you'll ever be. And so you may as well go for a hike and then come back with that renewed sense of perspective and do what you want to do anyway. Cause you're just you're not even a fly to them. And so you may as well enjoy your tiny little fly life to its fullest.
But I love that I love that perspective that you have, like that that you feel like that when you look at social media, because when I look at your videos I think, man, nothing I do will ever be as cool as this. So it's nice to know that we all feel that way.
Oh yeah, no, don't worry. Yeah, it's like I remember because I think I've got like on Instagram, it's like 11,000 followers, and I remember being at 9 or like 1,000 or even like 100, and it was kind of like, boy, if I could have 10,000 followers, I would be happy. Like that is happy. If I have 1,000 followers, like that is happiness. And like social media is not the answer. I mean, I have friends who have hundreds of thousands of followers, and they abhor social media, and so like it's a great tool. It helps you connect to really cool people and really cool ideas, but the truth and the actual happiness is found with those people and in those places, not on the social media
Absolutely.
that gives you a couple fake internet points for posting about them.
Hey humans, did you know you can officially join the Humans Outside 365 challenge and score some really cool and exclusive challenge swag, including a finisher medal and a decal on humansoutside.com/challenge? You'll also get an outdoor challenge guide written by me for you, an exclusive challenge tracker, and insider info all year long. You don't want to be left out of this. There is never a wrong time to join the Humans Outside 365 challenge. So get going. Join it today. Go to humansoutside.com/challenge to learn more now. Now, back to the show. So you were nonstop world travel guy before the pandemic, and you mentioned no longer working on the shifting careers. But if I understand correctly, that's sort of like pandemic driven. Like, well, we're not traveling, so we're not traveling. Um, what has pandemic life taught you about stories and about how we interact with our world? Just because you're here doing that work
That's a good
now.
question. Yeah, well, I guess the main difference is that I'm in my own bedroom doing this, talking somewhere familiar, which is kind of great. Um, I actually decided to step away from the global travel stuff about a month before the pandemic,
Oh,
which
very
is which
well
was the
played.
it was yeah, and I think if anything, it's kind of been a little bit of a reminder that following your own path can actually be a really safe bet. You
Yeah.
can always do the safe thing of following the big fancy job that's well paid and has benefits and they send you free gear. But if you are willing to kind of chase down what feels right and you
Mm.
stick with it, like the rewards are infinite. And so I had this moment in oh boy, I guess it was like a month before the pandemic happened, where it's basically this choice of doing this big project in Alaska or continuing and doing the big global stuff all around the world. And I was really pushing for this Alaska project, and it basically got shot down because Alaska is this one tiny place, and then they're going to focus on the big wide world. They got to chase down all the big stuff in the wide world. And I had this suspicion that if you spent a year in Alaska or honestly, even just a year at home, and you just dug down, you would find stories that nobody had ever heard of. Instead of chasing down and retelling the stories that everybody knows, you'd be able to find new ones that are absolutely incredible. And so that was the plan. Is basically we were going to start in Seward on July 4th, which didn't happen this year, and film out marathon and just kind of see what happened, see where it took. And so for the first time in, I guess second time in a year, and then like the 10th time in 100 years, this race is canceled. And following interviews, we ended up just kind of following this trail called the what is it? The
Historic Iditarod
Yeah,
Trail?
well,
Is
it's
that
got like a
the
big, it's INHT, let's see, International, no, Iditarod National Historic Trail.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and we ended up following this to kind of see where it leads. And it's like these stories are incredible. And it's absolutely just mind-bogglingly wild what you can find just like in these places and these roads and these trails that you've been on 10, 15, 20 times when you actually stop and ask. And it's not because the stories aren't wild, the fact that you're not hearing them. It's not that they're, not absolutely just like on par with all the other wild stuff you see documentaries about. It's just that nobody's taken time to kind of dust them off and look at them right. And so this March, hopefully, I'll be heading up to Nome to kind of complete that by foot, and then using watercolor and these kind of new techniques that we were talking about to kind of try to combine all of this, like some weird combination of like a Ken Burns documentary, Reading Rainbow, and like Red Bull TV. So
I love
yeah,
it.
I'm excited.
I want to back up a little bit and describe, it's like
Yeah.
explain what you just described for people who aren't in Alaska. So Mount
Mm-hmm.
Marathon is this very, very famous, not just Alaska famous, which is like a much lower bar, like worldwide famous race up this crazy. I mean, like I've talked to you guys about how steep trails are here and how Alaskans don't believe in switchbacks. Nowhere is that more true than on Mount Marathon. It goes straight up this mountain of 3,022 feet, right, Max?
Yeah, I think they
Yeah.
resurveyed it. It's actually like
No, yeah.
3,000 something, but we made a film that was called 3022, so I'll like
Yeah.
deny that
Yeah,
till
we'll
the
go
end.
with that. And everyone's stickers say 3022. So we're just going to keep with the sticker street cred. Um, it goes straight up this mountain. The race is a 5K from downtown Seward, which, if you've ever considered a cruise into Alaska or taken a cruise into Alaska, you might have gone through Seward. It's like the last stop on the cruise before you turn around and head back to the lower 48. And this race goes 5K, starts downtown, runs up this mountain and back down again. And it is like scree, which is like a very slidey rock. You essentially go up this mountain as fast as you can and then fall down it. That's what it is.
That
I've
was
never
that was a
done it.
kind way to call scree.
Yeah.
Scree is like if like black slate and a knife had a love child. And like the mountain is just full of it, and you just
It
you
is
scrape your
awful.
way up it, and then you just like basically, I mean, it's not even falling, you like roll your way down, and then
Oh
like
my
there's
gosh,
a
it's the
waterfall.
worst.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what
Yeah.
you said, that Alaska's like bar for fame is like lower, but I kind of think it's the other way around. Like our bar for Alaska famous is lower, but like our bar for Alaska like for craziness is
That's true.
so
So much
high, and
higher.
Alaskans think Mount Marathon is crazy, if that gives like any
That
sense of just
Totally.
this race.
Totally. So then the Iditarod National Historic Trail is the trail that they would have taken from Seward to Nome on the famous Iditarod run, right? That's the idea.
Well, kind of, and I'm just rediscovering all of this myself. I mean, like talk about the what you can learn if you actually go outside on stuff. So everybody knows the story of the Iditarod, right? It's like all these kids got sick, so they like brought like the serum, which is very pertinent right now, to Nome, and then the kids didn't get sick. But then like, well, actually, a lot of them died. But like, yes, it gets dark. But then if you actually like pick it apart, it's like three totally different things. It's
Hmm.
wild. So you've got like the Iditarod Trail is actually just goes to Iditarod, which is a town, not Nome. And it was basically a mail route from Seward to Iditarod for all these gold miners to basically send mail and gold back. It was 1910, which was the Iditarod race actually started in 1970. And the Serum Run, which is what everybody thinks about on this, of what started this, was was a run from Nanana to Nome, which wasn't even on, like, didn't even touch the Iditarod Trail
Hmm.
really. And so Dan Seavey and these others started the race on in 1970. So it's these three totally different things, each their own wild, insane, huge, wild, crazy story that you could like make decades of films about. And then people just kind of lump them together in Alaska. And I think
Yeah.
that's what people don't realize about, especially like Alaska, is they're like, oh, well, there's got some good mountains and some big trails, but like so do the Alps, in France.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is that like Alaskan mountain ranges could eat the Alps, or that there are even Alpses in Alaskan mountain ranges that nobody has even seen. There's just not enough people up here to like explore them. We know the
Mm,
Alps because there's cities all around them. Like
right.
there are ranges in Alaska so huge that they make the Alps and like the Rockies look like nothing, and there's just maybe one cabin at the base of one of them. It's
Right.
just
Well, you
scales
have
that
to
you can't even.
fly into.
Yeah, yeah. If you're
Yeah.
lucky, if like there's a weather window, you might be able to fly into. it's
Right. Exactly.
I had no
So
idea.
coming out of Seward, Johnson Pass is a part of that trail, that historic trail, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So I bring that up because some people listening to this might have seen pictures of my friends and I running on Johnson Pass last summer before I hurt myself and stopped
Uh,
running. Yeah, so that
yep.
was super fun. So just like packaging it up for people listening to this who have never been here, you have probably seen portions of this. And finally, in Nome, you are working with Carol Sepulou, who was on the podcast in season 2,
Oh yeah.
talking about mental health. So we've talked to Carol before, and we're familiar with her story. And she described running in Nome for us a little bit and what that's like. So that's
Oh, Carol is
all
such
with a
a
bow.
such a cool runner too. I mean her ability just to keep on going on a lot of these trails is amazing. Like I consider myself a pretty solid runner. But
Yeah,
when she was running these roads, I mean, she was running like basically back to back 100 milers. And after the first road and these like brutal winds and temperatures, and just like it was really tough going. And then Tim and I, who are running with her, are basically like, I think we need to not do that again for like several years. And Carol's like, okay, yes, I agree. And then the next day, she's like, so we're doing the next one next week. Is that right? And then she did it. And we basically just sat in
yeah.
the car and watched, and she did it.
So
Um,
I mean, just in case anybody has not heard Carol Sepul's episode in season
mhm.
2, I think you really, really should. And here's why: what Max just described, that's badass, no doubt. It's even more badass when you learn that Carol runs with a tracheotomy. And so she is a suicide attempt survivor. And to survive that, the doctors had to give her tracheotomy, which means that she essentially breathes through a tube in her neck. And she runs in very cold temperatures, by the way. And guess what tends to ice up in that? It's really incredible. I mean, just makes everybody else look like they're taking a nap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Carol's got some amazing obstacles that she's overcome, but then also just, I mean, like all of that aside, the reasons she runs, what makes it
Yes,
difficult, I mean, she's just putting in some serious miles for like
she is.
running up there. It's wild. And so the hope here is to run this final trail, the Sierra Run route. So we'll go from Anchorage to Nenana, part way by train, and then Nenana to Nome is the 674-mile journey in winter, where it gets sometimes to about -55 without wind chill, and be able to kind of trek through these trails, and then I'll meet up with Carol in White Mountain, and then we're going to run 70 miles to Nome to kind of finish it off
So great.
is the plan, and then hopefully be able to tie this wild thing together, this string of a watercolor basically, and using these watercolors to kind of fill in the pieces that aren't there and talk about the ways that the trails have really affected Alaska, and public health, and then also the history, the deep history that we rarely realize in Alaska. We almost pretend like Alaska started
Mm,
with the pioneers, and so often, I mean, it's as if Alaska started 100 years ago, but I'm just learning myself that, I mean, Alaska has had this rich culture for 10,000 years basically. And if you want to talk about endurance athletes, I mean, some of the people that lived here and the feats that they would do and the way that they would work off the landscape and how it affected what they were able to do is just absolutely incredible. And so I'm so looking forward to learning more and actually kind of connecting with this landscape through the feet, as well as the paintbrush, because
yeah.
it's just, yeah, it's such a unique place, and you feel it like from the second you step off a plane or a boat here. It is such a unique spot.
So we've been talking a little bit about creativity, about a little bit about Alaska. I want to go back to creativity before we tie this all up. when you and I were talking earlier, you said something about anybody being able to practice their way into being able to draw. I don't know that that's true. I, for example, draw so poorly that being on a team with me playing Pictionary is like an actual punishment for my teammates. Okay. I drew a dolphin a couple weeks ago and people thought it was a turtle. And I surveyed my Instagram friends and they also thought it was a turtle. Like it was not like that was the best guess scenario. It was not good. Okay.
Oh.
Like I couldn't remember what it looks like. I don't know. Okay, so do you think that going at like obviously you there's talent and then there's learning, right? Those are two different things. Do you think that heading outside can help people tap a creativity uh and not necessarily a talent, but like that creativity side of you, tap that in a way that maybe staying inside or an indoor pursuit can't?
That's a good question. I should let you know that being on a team with me for Pictionary is also a punishment because it takes so long. They're like, the time has been up for 2 minutes. What are you drawing? And I'm like, well, this is the tip of the dolphin's tail. And they're like, okay, all right, but like we can't guess because we lost.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that kind of gets to it is that like a lot of this just takes a long time. I mean,
Mm,
art takes a long time. When you see these big, big, big fancy pictures, I mean, they took a lot of time to paint. And if you see a time lapse of one of these beautiful watercolors, just like it seems like they make this landscape in two strokes of a brush and it's just so perfect. That's because they've done that 30,000 times over the course of 15 years. So the time element is really something that it's hard to see and really easy to kind of count yourself out because of it. And so often people will maybe draw and sketch because it's just everybody's an artist when you're a kid. Nobody's not creative, nobody's not a painter. It's just who you are. And then oftentimes people stop painting around 9 or maybe 12, and then maybe they'll pick it back up when they're 22 or 19. But it looks like a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old drew that because that's kind of when they stopped. And so what I try to encourage people is just like keep with it. Just keep with it because it's gonna take some time. But sometimes all it takes is a week or 2 or 3 weeks until you really kind of get hooked. And then a year goes by and all of a sudden you're a pretty good painter. And then 2 years go by and you're a really good painter. Just looking at the work, I've got sketchbooks, just like hundreds and hundreds of sketchbooks, and just looking at the work and how much I've changed in the last 5 years is amazing. In the last 2 years, in fact, is even incredible. And it just, whatever gets you into that is what counts. You're asking if being outside can help people with that creativity side, and 100%. Because if you're outside and you're sketching something, you're excited to be there, excited to capture it, that will get you sketching more, and that's going to make you a better painter, better artist. And whether it's painting mountains or painting self-portraits in mountains, whatever it is that can get you out and get you painting is going to make you a better a better painter. And I know there's a lot of people that say I could never paint or I could never do that, but you'd be absolutely shocked what you can do if you take a deep breath and lower your expectations, and then just just keep on working. I can't draw faces to save my life. That's the thing that scares me the most. But or even people, frankly, like all the people in my paintings are these tiny little backwards exclamation points because that's about the level I'm at. But I can paint mountains and I love it. And so you don't need to be a classic Renaissance painter to be a good painter. You just need to be having fun. That's what counts.
Um, so what I hear you saying is that it, like from a how-to perspective, this is like it's not osmosis, right? Like I'm not going to go outside and be like mountains speak to me and I will become a beautiful, artist. It's practice. Like take the sketchbook, give it a try, then do it
Oh,
again.
yeah. Most like I choke up in the mountains, honestly. The more beautiful it is, the worse my sketch. Oftentimes I'll get to like these gorgeous spots and I get so intimidated by how beautiful they are and how shoddy my sketch is gonna look compared to the view that I just I leave it in my backpack. I would say 90% of the sketches I make are from like boring views because they are less intimidating, and almost all of the times that my sketchbook just stays in the backpack is when it's really, really, really beautiful. But whatever it takes to kind of get out there and do it. And in fact, the pandemic is an awesome opportunity to just get painting. And that's
Yeah.
something that some artists and I, Jill Ritchie, who's one of them, she's a really good painter in Fairbanks. Claire Giordano, she's a really good painter in Seattle. We were like, how can we do something that encourages people to to stay positive in some pretty rough times when a lot of people can't get outside. And we've started this thing called Homebound Sketches on Instagram as opposed to Trailbound Sketches, which is my account. And so the idea is that we're just going to give people a prompt every single week, or well, 5 prompts a week. And then, they just kind of like have this community, and then we give little giveaways and stuff. But what it really takes is just practice. And you should get all your mistakes done here instead of after you hike up a giant, huge mountain and get frustrated because, you're cold and tired and wet and you have 1 hour to make a painting and it messed up.
Yeah. Okay, so this has been so fun. I could talk to you forever. I think I say that at the end of every podcast I do, though. So that's just how it goes, I guess, when you're a
It's
person
a
who
good
likes
sign.
interviewing people. Yeah. So okay, so we do a little leftovers round at the end because I just like to know some stuff, some practical
Mm.
things from our guests. So can you tell us what is your favorite piece of outdoor gear? What is something that is like your favorite?
Oh man. Okay, can I do favorite piece of outdoor gear and then favorite piece of art gear? Because I feel like those are
Yes.
almost connected, but not. Okay. Favorite piece of outdoor gear is like those jackets that have pockets. Like I love the pockets that are on the front, like this, like a nice little zip up hoodie or something with like the pockets like right on the front. It's just game changer. You can put anything in there, like sketchbook, sketchpad, like like that's all you need is just like jacket pockets. Oh, it's the best. I have one and I just kind of wear it to death. It's kind of lame, but it's like, boy, that is just my favorite piece of outdoor gear. And as far as painting goes, I think my favorite piece of outdoor gear is these little tiny travel palettes. The Art Toolkit makes a really good one. I've got one from my grandmother as well, and they're these tiny little palettes. They're very small. They destroy your excuse to be able to take things anywhere, and you can use them like a little water brush, which are really useful. And just honestly, just having something small and like compact like that, like I've got one here, and just like being able to paint anywhere is such a gift.
What is your most essential piece of outdoor gear?
My
Most
most
essential thing.
essential piece
Like
of
you
outdoor
can't
gear.
live without this. Maybe it is the watercolor, the art gear you just mentioned.
That's a good question. I mean, like it would be lame to say just a backpack, but a
No,
backpack is pretty incredible. I mean, just
yeah, good.
it's
I mean, a
basically
good
extra
backpack's
arm.
a game changer, right? Like one that
Mm-hmm.
fits poorly, 0 stars, negative stars.
Yeah.
One that fits well, like life changing.
Just like a small vest too. I mean, like a small vest, a small backpack, for running, especially. I guess those vests that
Hmm.
you can put on, they really kind of changed things for me because all of a sudden I could carry these sketchbooks with me. And I would say, as far as like I couldn't live without too, it'd be like a little sketchbook because um, it changes your perspective on things because a big one is intimidating and you got to spend a lot of time, but it's not hard to make a pretty solid tiny painting. And so, like, mentally and physically, a tiny little sketchbook absolutely is a game changer for me. And I don't think I could live without them. But yeah, little backpack, little sketchbook, they do the trick.
I mean, you mentioned Solomon earlier. I love their Advanced Skin 12.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because that sucker fits probably more stuff than you really should have with you. And yeah. And it just like it is like a second skin. It's just super comfortable. And now you have all of the snacks in the land and probably the extra jacket you didn't really need. So
Yeah, it's like a weight training at that point. For me, it's
yeah,
like always like, yeah, those they fit so much, and then it's like, well, maybe I need a camera and another sketchbook, and then this and a painting and a pen, and like, yeah, it's basically a small art store on my
yeah.
back.
Now you're essentially heading up the mountain with like a roller suitcase. It's over. So
Yeah. It's a gateway drug, really.
all right. Final thing, last but not least. If you were going to describe for us your ideal outdoor moment or your favorite outdoor moment, like when you close your eyes and like think of that happy place outside, where are you and what are you doing?
Um, I think I'm in France. I'm on a little kind of like unknown hill that we had no idea about. And it's where my wife and I got engaged a couple of years ago. And it was an absolutely perfect day. It wasn't anything fancy or like glitzy. We just went to like a supermarket because we're like, I lost my wallet. So I think we had like basically no money. And we got like some like cheap, like little sausages and like some cheap little things. And then I actually borrowed her card and secretly got some cheap champagne. And I proposed to her with like a little like ring made out of grass. with a like promise to get a fancier one. And it was just like one of those days where like everything was perfect, and like the, including the company. And yeah, it's so wonderful to be able to share moments like that with the landscape, and I feel like it really gave back as well. So that's when I blink, that's what's on my eyelids.
Max, thank you so much for joining us on the Humans Outside podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. This was awesome. I feel like I learn more every time I share about this, and I'm so excited to kind of get back to sketching now. I feel even more inspired.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for others to find the podcast too. What you say matters. It really truly does make a difference. And until next time, we'll see you out there.